During Trump's election, the whole middle class, the impoverished from the middle class, ultimately turned into Trump supporters. This is certainly a classic example of flipping an entire narrative that has been observed, that the Democrats have shifted entirely to the elite, and the Trump supporters are from the lower and middle class. That is indeed very nice to see. That is, of course, almost impossible in the Netherlands, but in America, we have learned that anything is possible.
One thing I consider to be a truly remarkable dynamic is that the Democrats in the United States have consistently been the party of the working and middle classes. If we take a moment to reflect on Biden and Obama, it's evident that they were very much in favor of promoting the stock market, mainly because their target audience was aging and approaching retirement, heavily invested in their assets and their stocks. Trump is really conducting a massive wealth transfer from the ultra-rich to the middle class once more. And you almost see an inverted dynamic where Republicans are actually doing more for the middle class than Democrats ever said they would. In simple terms, when we analyze effectively, it has never resulted in wealth, a transfer of wealth from the ultra-rich to the middle class. You can see some of that happening now as the policies aren't really based on, oh well, the richest are getting richer. Actually, if you examine that list, everyone has seen their wealth decline since Trump became president. Now everyone is crying out in outrage because this is unacceptable. I think this is quite a remarkable dynamic.
Well, I thought that regardless. During Trump's election, the whole middle class, the impoverished from the middle class, ultimately turned into Trump supporters. This is certainly a classic example of flipping an entire narrative that has been observed, that the Democrats have shifted entirely to the elite, and the Trump supporters are from the lower and middle class. That is indeed very nice to see. That is, of course, almost impossible in the Netherlands, but in America, we have learned that anything is possible.
But can we expect the same trend in Europe? I mean, you've seen Le Pen, of course, who was convicted for the utilization of European financial resources, as all French parties do. But let's move on. Utilizing EU funds for purposes other than those intended and now being unable to take part in the presidential elections in the country of France does indeed have a massive middle class, though, that follows her. We must consider, for Europe, of course, that the Netherlands is not very relevant to the entire European political climate. However, if we examine France, you see a movement in that direction. So when you look at Germany, you also see a movement in that direction. Can we expect a similar situation here?
Yes, but that has always been the case. This has always been the case in Europe. But in America, it is particularly striking that the Republican Party, which traditionally represents the wealthy conservatives, has completely flipped. And if you observe Germany, along with the Netherlands and France, where far-right voters are located, yes, they represent certain economic classes. I don't know if you've seen the picture of Germany with the election results. It's almost a beautiful map, red and blue, and everything was blue. East Germany, yes, you see those walls, almost the walls. A beautiful picture of the walls back. Yes, almost all former Eastern European municipalities voted for the far right. So yes, this has been going on for a very long time. And yes, that is, of course, understandable. People who are struggling tend to blame other forces for their misery, whether that is justified or not. So I will leave that open for now. I always look at myself first.
Isn't this simply a history that is currently repeating itself once again?
Yes, I think the far right used to originate from southern Germany, Austria. I don't know, that's always the human pendulum. It swings from left to right every time. And that's the case in Europe too. And that is also connected to emigration and refugees. I remember that story well, a beautiful story. Of course, World War I in your region, where various Belgians were taken in because they were fleeing World War I. Ultimately, they were expelled from the country once more, as they had had enough of those Belgians. Break time, they were also considered inferior in the southern part. In my opinion, that remains a significant issue in the history of both nations, except for 100 years prior. But it is also a beautiful example. At one point, Belgians were also spat out in the 1920s because they flooded all of Brabant and Limburg after the war, or during the war, the First World War, and you always get extremes. Whether it has a color or not, always when you mix one substance with another, you always get a chemical reaction.
Also, if you go back further, this is how we started with the VOC. It was Napoleon, I believe, who conquered Antwerp. And he said to the market traders, that free trade, you can still do a bit, but you have to leave here. You get 2 years too.
I think it was the Spaniards, right? I thought Napoleon came back only after that. I believe it was the Spaniards. The Spaniards. They were the ones who said, it's our religion or nothing. Jews and artists escaped from Antwerp at that time, heading to Amsterdam. This has truly been the foundation of the city. stemming from the Golden Age. Absolutely. Concerning the initiators, there are 2 official hands directed at Antwerp. That's right, yes. And let's not overlook innovation. My former office was at the Marine Grounds. This past March marked the first time in history the replicas of a VOC ship, a Portuguese ship, and a Spanish ship from that period were all together. What many don't realize is that real innovation, the Dutch had a windmill. Eventually, someone transformed a circular motion into a vertical one, and they could saw an entire tree in one piece, cut wood. This allowed us to construct much bigger ships. I once came across a beautiful story about it, but then I saw the outcome. I also read a story about Portuguese during an invasion on the little island and suddenly saw a Dutch ship coming in. Holy crap, this is a big ship. Now I saw them next to each other. I took a picture of it, and then you really think, holy shit, that ship is huge. You have a Portuguese ship, a Spanish ship, and an enormous Dutch ship lying next to it. Thanks to innovation, we could saw long trees in one piece. In the end, that's the reason we could manage much bigger ships, much more cargo. It meant that the Spaniards and Portuguese had absolutely no chance to compete with us. We could fit 20 times more in the same ship.
That is also a bit of the red thread of this podcast, perhaps. So we really need to focus more on innovation. We must have more faith in innovation, because if we revert to, okay, this is what we have, and that is essentially protectionism. Without innovation, we will just end up very stuck.
The Netherlands could never have become the Netherlands without innovation. VOC is due to innovation. We've been able to build the entire country based on innovation. We are a worldwide innovation nation, and we are increasingly losing that. Over the past months and quarters, investment in innovation has reached an all-time low compared to the last 20 years. If this trend persists, we will genuinely lose the competition. We have far too little funding available for innovation. Mind you, innovation is about trying and failing. It's not a one-off attempt. I didn't invent it. I tried thousands of times at what didn't work, and it clicked. There are numerous instances of innovation that have failed. Yet after trying a second, third, fourth, or fifth time, success can occur. And we really need to embrace that much more here in the Netherlands, also in Europe, but especially in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands has always been an innovative country. Please let's invest more money and time in that to assist entrepreneurs from universities test and validate in the market and launch them into the market. I cannot stress this enough. The Netherlands heavily relies on innovation